Hi everybody, I'm Jamie of Pandora Astrology, and with me is...
Hey guys, it's Julia Mijas, and I'm joining in from San Francisco today.
Yes, and I'm in Berkeley. And today we want to talk to you about something really important that we've discovered called the pandemic hot degree. And we first spoke about this in a video that we made a couple of months ago called The Astrology of the Coronavirus Pandemic. And this video is meant to sort of piggyback on those themes. And also it refers back to the main event that this is all about, which actually happened in January. And we posted a video of that actually last November. But when we made that original video about the January event in November, we didn't really know what this was going to feel like. And now we have a much better sense. So today, what we want to tell you about is that this pandemic has a lesson. And its placement in 22 degrees of Capricorn has constituted a hot degree. And a hot degree is something where a couple of planets connect and then they heat that degree up. And when other things transit it, it gets triggered, and it doesn't expire until one of those planets leaves sign. And Saturn doesn't leave sign until the end of the year. And so 2020 is going to be feeling this pretty much all year. And so we're facing this lesson of this pandemic. It's going to be going on all year, and I thought you should know about it, what the lesson is, and how to face it, and how you can, kind of get your power back. So I'm going to unabashedly read from my notes because I wrote this stuff down, and I feel like it's really important to tell it to you in the words that I have carefully crafted. As you can see in this chart, the event that happened was on January 12th. We have this chart set for Washington, D.C., and you can see that Saturn and Pluto are conjunct at 22 degrees Capricorn. With them is also Mercury and Ceres, and the Sun is getting ready to move into 22 degrees of Capricorn, and so this is an extremely hot degree. And so the pandemic hot degree is 22 degrees of Capricorn, and the house it falls into in your chart tells you where, in what area of life, you'll be most impacted by this pandemic and where you will face its lesson. And its lesson is a very Saturn and Pluto lesson. It is, how can you face things that are beyond your control? Because that's what Pluto does. It puts us face to face with stuff that is just bigger than ourselves, that is way beyond our control. And how can you take responsibility for these things, even though they are beyond your control and bigger than you are? And that's a very Saturn idea. Saturn is about responsibility. How do you respond? It's also about authority and how do you be the author of your own existence. So the lesson in total is, how can you take responsibility for things that are beyond your control and do so gracefully and graciously? Now, in the last month or two, I have been taking this 22 degrees Capricorn and putting it in the charts of the clients that I see and asking myself, how is this impacting this person? So I'm going to say more about that in the next video, but for now, let's keep it simple. So I'm going to just roll out some thoughts at you. Human beings love to be swept away. This is a very Pluto thing. In an earlier era, we would call this surrender, but surrender's kind of become a dirty word associated with capitulation and giving up. But I'm talking about surrendering to something greater than yourself that's carrying you in exactly the direction that you wanted to go anyway. Everybody yearns to be carried along by greater forces toward their perfect destination. Everybody, that's why we love falling in love. It's why we want to know our destiny. It's why we get addicted to substances. It's all about the pleasure and satisfaction of surrender. But when faced with surrendering to a greater force that's taking us in exactly the wrong direction where we don't want to go, we cry victim. And this is also a very Pluto response. Pluto is that force that sweeps us away. And when it's where we wanted to go, we're like, oh, Pluto, oh, I love you. What a seducer. But when Pluto is taking us in a direction we don't want to go, we're like, Pluto, the perpetrator, the villain of the piece, right? So this is the worst sensation we can have as human beings. It's violating, terrifying, overwhelming. And when we get onto a ride that we think will take us exactly where we want to go, with little or no effort of our own, but it takes us in the wrong direction, we feel betrayed, used, and abused. This is how falling in love leads to betrayal, how that first cigarette leads to lung cancer, and how turning a profit becomes corporate greed. This is exactly how things can go to extremes and veer into the territory of beyond our control. It is possible to respond, here's where Saturn comes in, to any of these situations in a way that can turn it around. This is what I mean by taking responsibility for situations that are beyond your control. You can do it before, during, or even after the fact. To do it before is to see the situation for what it is. A situation where you really want control, but something is happening that's much, much bigger than you are. Then what you need to do is back off, check the big picture, and find some small part that you do have control over. Then you take responsibility for that. Like, you may have no control over a global pandemic. I mean, who does, right? That's happening right now, which it is, and you may not have control over how your state's governor responds to it, but you can control the measures you take to keep yourself and your family safe. If you're concerned with losing your job, you can protest that, and you can do so responsibly and safely. Your choices may be small and they may feel really small and meaningless, but you can make those choices, and you should, because that is where you are the author of your own existence. The rest, you got to let go of because it's literally beyond your control. To respond during something that's bigger than yourself is much like what I've already said here. Stuff veers out of control and you take restrained and disciplined action to keep safe and employed in the best balance that you can manage during this pandemic. Now, to respond after the fact is to manage the emotional damage you got during the event that was beyond your control. The best example of this is when a child is abused and grows up to be a traumatized adult. It's too late to change your childhood. That stuff already happened. You can't go back and unhappen it. But it's not too late to relax your victim posture, and it's not too late to stop complaining. At this point, we humans have developed many helpful forms of trauma therapy, from catharsis to electricity, rehab, and more. Probably one of these can help you reclaim your sense of safety, your sovereign ownership of your body and your life, your peace of mind, and your precious heart. You can choose to find one and make your life your own by ending the blame, resentment, and bitterness that have stalked you all these years. So what you do to take responsibility for something after it happens is you go clean it up. You don't just bury it. You don't just sit with the trauma, cry victim for the rest of your life in that frozen state of fear and anguish and react to everything unconsciously from that place. You go in with a giant dump truck and you take all that garbage that life handed you and you haul it away and you plant flowers instead. And we all have to do that. That's everybody's responsibility for themselves. So now back to the main idea here, which is the lesson of the pandemic hot degree. How can you face things that are beyond your control? Take responsibility for them and do so gracefully and graciously. That's the way to take this awful situation and turn it into compost for your evolution. You can emerge stronger, wiser, more resilient instead of destroyed. So now I wanna read the Serenity Prayer because I think this is really what can help us right now. You may know this through any anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous and all of the branches from that. It's a great prayer for anyone, most any time, but especially now, I think. And I want to read you a special version of it that I found on the internet. I don't know who authored these changes to the Serenity Prayer, but I really like them because I think they introduce some humor. It's called My Serenity Prayer. And where it says Lord, because I'm a secular humanist, I'm going to say greater self instead. Greater self, grant me, not my spouse, my kids, or my friends, the serenity, remaining unruffled in spite of it all, to accept, not just endure, suffer, and bear, the things, as well as the people in my life, I cannot change, even though I've tried and tried. You seeing these parentheses? The courage, which can only come from you, O my greater self, to change the things I can, particularly about myself, and the wisdom, that is your area too, greater self, to know, not just guess or hope, the difference between your will and mine. So I've talked a whole lot here, and Julia, I haven't checked in with you at all. I've just kind of been rambling, and I want to know your thoughts about this because I know you've been looking at this hot degree in people's charts too, and you've been coping with it in your own way. And I'd love to hear any thoughts you have about all that right now before we close the video.
Something that just kind of came to mind, especially when you were talking about things greater than you, things beyond your control, is Saturn to traditional astrologers. Before we had modern telescopes where we could discover Uranus and Neptune and Pluto and all these asteroids, Saturn was the end of the universe.
Yes.
To the traditional people. So Saturn represented all of these ending type things like time and death, because it was literally the boundary of existence.
Yes.
Now for our modern, for the modern crowd these days, of course, we're always discovering more bodies in the sky, but the most actively used ending of our solar system now is Pluto. I know Eris is becoming more popular, but trying to get transits with Eris, it's so far away. I could only see it being used in progressions effectively. But Pluto is kind of the last planet that can really actually affect us by transits and those types of things. So, it is, both of them coming together symbolically is really just, the outskirts of like experience. If the sun and the moon is where our center is, where a lot of our personality, where our vitality, all of these lights that actually even affect our vitality, and our most personal parts of ourselves. These planets really represent the most outward forces. In our lives.
Yep, and isn't that the definition of beyond our control?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and in our next video, we're going to show you how to find the pandemic hot degree in your own chart. And until then, we'll see you around the cosmos. Bye.
Bye-bye.